Hello, good evening, and welcome to the third of our Friday night spooky sessions. Tonight, there's going to be a little bit of a change. I'm going to read you a fictional story, and then I'm going to tell you a ghost story that's a little bit closer to home. So sit back, relax, and listen to a story that I've chosen for you tonight called Conscience. I hope you enjoy it. Your brain is a funny thing. Most of the time, it knows what's better for you in any given situation, and it will take ever so subtle control of you to make sure you make the right decision. However, sometimes if you abuse those mechanisms, your brain will take control according to match your actions. Sometimes the responses that it does come up with are less than satisfactory. Sometimes they're absolutely terrifying, and sometimes they're deadly. Tom was not a friendly man. He wasn't the kind of man that had an understandable reason behind his unpleasantness either. He just wasn't a very nice person. However, using that life skill, he'd put himself in a position where he could manipulate people into the dirt. He was a high-level manager at a local electronics store, and he'd managed to completely and utterly trample his fellow workers just all his way up the ladder, using every tactic he had to make them seem unfit for the job. He was a sociopath in every sense of the word, and today his sociopathic ways held the life of a worker in his hands. Tom sat in his chair and he stared at the janitor with a true sense of apathy. "Please, Tom, I need this job to keep payments on my studio apartment. I'm begging you. I'm sorry that I missed that carpet stain the other day. I promise you it won't happen again. Please, please don't throw me out into the street. Please, I'm begging you." Tom shifted in his chair. "Listen, bud, your situation is of no importance to me. There are many more efficient people out there than waiting in line for your job. People who won't miss that one stain on the carpet. You can't outperform them, so you lose. Take anything that's yours and go home." The janitor just stood speechless in the middle of the office, holding back a torrent of emotion. He was afraid. He was sad. How would he live now? He turned and slowly walked out of the office, head hung low. What was he going to do? He closed the office door behind him with a click. Tom sat back and smiled. Didn't really like that guy anyway. I'm glad I had a reason to fire him. Maybe the new guy will be able to get him to do his damn job. He pulled a bottle of cognac out of his desk drawer and drank directly out of it. And he put his feet up on the desk and began to laugh. Oh, he felt on top of the world. He was the king of everything. And he had the power to condemn a man to die for a simple mistake. That made him feel pretty good. And he thought back to high school, all the girls he'd stolen from their respective boyfriends, and then decided that he had no further use for them, leaving them single. And all the times he'd stolen homework, and all the times of those that he'd laughed at when they failed. He didn't care about their lives. He only cared that he lived in the moment, and he'd done exactly what he wanted to do. And he didn't care about anybody. He was just only satisfied with living his life the way he wanted to live it. Well, the workday was almost over and Christmas was coming up fast. He yawned, pulled himself up, and he decided he'd rather have a little more money to himself to buy himself gifts. So he typed a quick email to all his employees. Attention workers, there will be no Christmas bonus this year. There will be no compensation for this. Work harder. He sent the email, closed his laptop, packed his things and left the store. 20 minutes later, he'd arrived at his 2-story home in the quiet little suburb of the city. He opened the door and his wife welcomed him in. "Hey, Tom, how was work?" "Same shit as usual. Go make me dinner." "Oh, okay. I love you, dear." Yeah. Tom lived at home just with his wife. Despite her desires, they had no children. Despite how the situation may appear to anyone viewing it, she had the truest affection for her husband and was willing to work through anything. He held affection only for himself, but kept her around because she was useful. 3 hours after dinner, Tom was upstairs, readying himself for sleep. And as he switched off the light in the bedroom, he thought he heard a faint crying. Not the crying of his wife, she'd gone to sleep. A soft crying that seemed to come from the darkness. It gave him a peculiar feeling. He felt the slightest bit of pity. He knew not for what, only that he was sad for something. Didn't know what it was. But in an instant it was gone and he'd forgotten it. He shook it off and he just rationalised it as something that was fatigue-inducing and, working on the fact that he was tired. And it was just a hallucination, so, got into his bedroom, climbed into bed with his wife and attempted to fall asleep. But the moment before he drifted off to sleep, an image flashed before his eyes. The image of a cold, withered man sitting and quietly sobbing in a dark alley. Someone on the edge of death. Tom was suddenly awash with grief and depression and a piercing fear. He quickly sat up, breathing heavily. He looked around him. There was nothing there, only the sound of his own pulse in his ears. He just collapsed back into the bed and passed out, exhausted from the sudden emotional outburst. He woke up hours later at 9 a.m. It was Saturday, December the 24th, the day before Christmas, and he rolled out of bed, walked into the hallway, went into the bathroom to brush his teeth, and as he walked out of the bathroom, he heard it again. The sound of someone crying. It got louder. And he looked around himself and, and for an instant he saw a pair of small white eyes focused on him, just staring at him. They were gone in an instant and took the crying with them. But they left Tom with something he felt as if a weight had been laid on his heart, like a sadness had just been thrust on him. And, it just happened. It was like a weight of depression. And as the day went on, the weight got heavier and heavier. He got more and more depressed. He became close to crying at certain times, and he would be overwhelmed with pity for others. And he just didn't understand why he was feeling this way. He hated it. He didn't like it. And he was just beside himself. He didn't know what was happening to him. He knew something, though, the feeling was eating him alive. And well, the night came, and Tom walked to his bedroom, and as he came to the bedroom door, he felt a chill on his back. It was a ghostly, freezing chill. And with it came the crying. Soft, quiet, piercing crying. It seemed to be coming from downstairs. The chill dwindled, and then the crying faded away. Tom climbed into bed and tried to fall asleep, but he couldn't. There was a presence in the room. He sat up and he looked around the room, and in the right-hand corner, there was a pair of white eyes staring at him, unblinking. Tom blinked out of surprise, and in an instant, the eyes were right in front of him. They stared into his soul. Tom's entire body was suddenly overwhelmed by a horrible, freezing chill. The eyes were connected to a dark, shifting figure. It whispered to him, "You killed him." With that, Tom just passed out with fear. The next morning, it was Christmas Day. And Tom said to himself, "Did you see or hear anything during the night?" "No, dear. Last night and the night before you slept very soundly. You must have been dreaming." Tom nervously thought to himself, "That's all it was. It was just a bad dream. I imagined all of it. Yeah, that's right. Things like that, they don't happen in real life. It was just a dream. It was nothing." Well, it was Christmas morning, as you knew, and Tom hadn't bought a present for anybody. He was too busy relishing all the money he'd got by cutting the Christmas bonus from his workers. And his wife pulled out a folded heart. "Tom, I made this for you." Tom glanced at it as if he was reading the morning newspaper. Yeah, that's great. Put it somewhere nice." "I wrote something on it just for you." "I'll read it later. Put it away." A tear welled up in his wife's eye. "All right, dear. I know you've been stressed." And she turned and quickly walked up the stairs to the bedroom. Tom continued to read the paper. Christmas was of no importance to him. He could buy his own gifts just fine. Everyone should just be able to sustain themselves as well. No fuss, no carry on. It's all ridiculous. And it was just a moment after his wife had left the room. The crying returned. But it wasn't the same faint crying as before. This time it was his wife, softly crying in the bedroom. And it sounded very similar to the crying of before. Tom ignored her. The day lazily passed by, Tom and his wife going about their respective business. Tom came out the bathroom and started down the hall, and he just froze, paralysed with a sudden, overwhelming fear. The crying was coming from downstairs. It was loud. It was beckoning, and he couldn't move. He just couldn't move. He was frozen. He felt this urge pulling him downstairs, so he walked down the stairs. When the crying grew louder and louder, it beckoned him more and more, and he could feel this chill slowly overtaking him as he made his way closer and closer. Further down the stairs, he didn't even feel like he had control over his emotions anymore. The crying was pulling him, and he turned the corner and went to the living room to see where the crying was coming from. And there was this thin, emaciated man standing in the middle of his living room. He was clothed in tattered rags, with unwashed hair and an unkempt body. His back was facing Tom, who felt this overwhelming urge just to walk up to the man. The chill had completely taken over his body, and it became even colder as he walked towards him. He put his hand on the man's shoulder, and he stopped crying and began to breathe heavily. He whipped round and stared into Tom's eyes with his own colourless eyes. His face was horribly disfigured, as if beginning to decay. He whispered to Tom, "You killed me." Tom suddenly felt pain, overwhelming, horrifying pain. Not physical pain, it was emotional pain. He felt depression as if it was collected over years and years and concentrated into a single moment. Anger, grief, guilt, years and years of emotional pain concentrated into one excruciating moment. He collapsed onto the floor, screaming and writhing in a sea of uncontrolled emotion. The disfigured man looked down at him with his cold, colourless eyes. His body had turned into one not of filth, but one that had just been physically decayed. He began to speak in a stuttering, elderly voice. You condemned dozens to scarring, emotional torment. You condemned them to poverty, physical pain, and soul-crushing fear. You condemned them to guilt and shame and undying sadness. All for your own amusement, all for your own momentary satisfaction. Tom's emotional torture became amplified. The man continued to speak. Look at you. You took a happy, fulfilling Christmas from almost 200 people so you could satisfy your own desires. Tom could only stare in horror at the figure looming over him. He just couldn't speak, he couldn't voluntarily move, only reacting to what was going on around him. He was shaking. But this time, said the man, you crossed the line. You just didn't take gifts from your workers. You took something much more important. You took that janitor's life. Tom suddenly felt physical pain, hunger, piercing cold, the pains of thirst. The man continued. Even if you didn't notice the obituary, I did. It was for him. They found him in the street, dead of hypothermia. You've gone too far. You must pay. You must feel his pain. And you must give your life as he lost his. The man stood up and said these words. Rest in peace. The man pulled back, and suddenly the room was filled with the sounds of screeching, of pain, of torment. The pain of death came upon Tom. He felt the cold, the fear of the man, the anger towards Tom for doing this to him. He felt every emotion, every physical stimuli. And as Tom died, he felt the total pain of dying, concentrated into the space of a few seconds. The cold reached a peak. The hunger began to eat him from the inside. The thirst had consumed every drop of water in his body. The figure engulfed him with a final peak of emotion. Everything was silent. He was gone. Tom's wife, now widowed, sat crying in the living room. Her husband lay there, frozen in place by rigor mortis. The police were all about the house, the coroner and the head detective next to Tom's body. So, Mr. Coroner, heart attack, you see? Undeniably. Must have come on quite quickly. At least it was nearly painless. Poor guy. On Christmas too, said the detective. Not a very good present. Well, the human brain can be a funny thing. However, if you provoke a mechanism too harshly, it will react harshly, especially your conscience. If you suppress it for years, while at the same time committing acts that would normally get a reaction from it, you only build up your own pressure, because if you don't notice it building, you can't keep that pressure bottled up forever. Because if you do, it might just kill you. And that is the end of your fictional story, which was called Conscience. Now, I've got something a little bit different for you this week. And instead of reading you a true story, I actually want to share with you some things that have been happening in my own home. And I've actually noticed it's been sort of like, say, it's been picking up a little bit since I started, doing these spooky videos. And if you look back at a video I'd done previously on the paranormal, you'll remember that I told you that there have been a few things happening in my own home. I've had things go missing and then turn up again. I've been hearing something that sounded like a man's whistle right beside me in my kitchen when I've been talking, to a member of my family, and they've heard it too. Last Friday, I heard 3 loud knocks on the wall, and that was definitely inside my home. It was right above where my freezer is, and there's just bare wall there, so there was definitely nobody on the other side, to knock there or anything like that. There was nobody there. But since I last spoke to you, there's been more knocking. There's been more things being moved. Today, my son was doing some hoovering for me, and I know this sounds really crazy, but a bit of plastic was chucked at him. It sort of missed his shoulder and sort of caught him, but it just came flying over the side of him and landed, in front of him while he was busy hoovering. And it didn't exactly frighten him, but it caught him unawares. And, he picked this thing up and it was like, what is this? And it turned out it was a little bit of trimming from round the outside of my patio doors. Now, you've got to go through another set of doors to get through to the patio doors. And those doors were closed. So we're not quite sure how that happened. And there were no cats around because the cats are terrified of the Hoover. There's laminate flooring, so it wasn't anything that was hidden on a carpet that you couldn't see. It was just a quick hoover up with some dust on the floor. We're relatively clean and tidy people, in this house. I've been getting an awful lot of scent of flowers. And I don't know where that's coming from. Both my kids have come and asked me if I've called for them. They've been hearing someone saying their name. My husband, who is a complete skeptic, has been asking who's been moving his stuff around, and it's certainly not been me. He's also said he's heard his name mentioned, and he thought it was me calling him. That certainly wasn't me. So here I am. I'm not sure what to think. This house is 9 years old, and before it was constructed, it was in replacement from old Victorian dwellings that they were falling to bits. So, it was decided by builders to knock the whole lot down, to put up some bungalows and some townhouses, and got a great big park, so there's somewhere nice to wheel to. But I just don't understand what's happening. I can hear the odd whisper beside me, and I'll look up and say, "Did you say something?" And it's like, "No." Okay. What do you guys think? Do you think, don't get me wrong, it doesn't frighten me. I'm just curious. And I'm certainly not going to stop doing the Friday night sessions. The only way I'll stop doing that is if people lose interest in it. But I'm just wondering if me doing this and talking about ghosts and stuff like that, or weird things, I'm just wondering if it's, giving something a little bit of extra energy, something that's trying to tell me something. I don't know. I have no clue. I can't tell you exactly what this house was built right on top of. Was it built on top of an old house that was filled with, so many generations of families? I don't know. So is there someone trying to get in touch with me? Or do you think that, there's a presence in my house? I just don't understand it. And I would very much welcome any comments that you would like to make. Well, thank you for coming to Friday night spooky sessions. It's now coming up to 30 minutes. I'd like to wish you good night, and I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.